the Gods Fear by Wdowski. Chapter 12. Glen, Granite, Rubel, Wdowski, Mahan, Dr. Hogan, Dr. Verne, and Mr. Landru all met in the cramped conference room. They were to discuss their next move. The Polo's D-mass generator was more than 8 hours away before they would be able to make another hyper jump. Several hours ago, they received a response from the EGG on the SpookyCom to their report of the attack on the Venture. "We need to strike back at these Shingnese bastards." Rubel slammed his fist on the conference table. "Is the least we can do after this mess you have created by not taking out their hyper-engines when we could have." "I say we do as the Stellar Navy has ordered." Coolly responded Granite. "We need to stay in the system and gather as much intelligence as we can for the battle fleet. We are not a part of the Stellar Navy and not commissioned by the EGG. If anything, they did almost everything they could to hamper and even prevent us from even launching this mission," responded Dr. Verne. Glen looked at Rubel, deeply affected by his words. "You may be right that I am at fault for the death of JD and all aboard the Venture. But I am not going to risk the lives on the Polo to compound my mistake." Dr. Hogan reassured him. "Glen, it is unjust to put the blame on yourself for the destruction of the Venture. It was J.D. Dorfman's decision to continue on to Shing 4. All his passengers made the choice to take the trip to the Shingnese home world, in spite of these tense times. They all knew, or should have known, the risks they were taking to visit a civilization that had broken off all diplomatic relations with the Earth." "I agree with Dr. Hogan," supported Dr. Verne. "It was their constitutional guaranteed right of freedom of travel. Freedom means that adults have the right to make risky or even foolish decisions. If others take on the power to protect us from ourselves, we are no longer living in a free society. Mr. Yeager, you were not responsible for their decision to go on to Shing 4, and if I can be so blunt, it was not yours or Ambassador Stern's position to stop other free adults from making the decision they did, no matter how foolish it may have been." "Dr. Verne is right," stated Captain Mahan. Granite spoke up, looking first at Captain Rubel and then to Glen. "You cannot blame yourself for their poor decisions or the violent response of the Shingnese. I though understand your concern not to add the destruction of the Polo to this tragedy, but we cannot shirk off this responsibility. We are the only Earth vessel in the Shing system. Our fleet will be arriving here in 2 weeks. Whatever intelligence we can gather on the Shingnese military forces can give our fleet a much-needed tactical advantage," responded Granite. "Those 3 Shingnese warships will also be here in 2 weeks. I for one do not have your confidence in our government being punctual," replied Glen. "Nor I," agreed Captain Rubel, calming down a bit, "but I am confident that Wdowski's negative gravity repelling shield can give us the needed advantage. If we do get into a scrape with those warships, shields that have never been tested." Glen looked at the captain in disbelief. "You want to risk the lives of everyone on board on shields that have not even been tested in a controlled situation, forget about in a live fire fight? If you say it that way, it doesn't sound like such a great idea." Rubel responded, "Yet I am confident Wdowski's shields will work." Wdowski smiled from his captain's praise. "Besides, if those ships get too close, we will be ready to jump out of here any time we want to. If we are not going to strike them ourselves, I do not see how we would be risking the Polo if we at least do as the Navy requests." "We can hide in the rock and ice ring that orbits Shing 7, pointed out Granite. "We can send down a work gang of construction robots onto the surface of Shing 7 to set up a much more effective listening and surveillance station to monitor the Shingnese forces." Uncharacteristically, Landru spoke. "Mr. Yeager, if I may point out." Glen gave Landru his full attention, not accustomed to Landru giving his opinion during a meeting with others. Such a listening and surveillance station could also indirectly reveal important information on the whereabouts of Captain Demi and his crew, or at least their fate. "That is a very good point, Landru." Glen looked Captain Rubel straight into his eyes while pointing a firm finger at him. "In less than 8 hours, on my order, we can jump out of this system at any time." "Aye, Mr. Yeager, at any time on your order," responded the ship's captain. "Although I recommend you use that jump to jump closer to Shing 7. We will have to wait another 24 hours, but we still have at least 12 days before they can reach us. It should give us plenty of time for the D-mass generator to cool down and realign for another jump." Glen looked at the group around the conference table. "Then it seems we will do as the Navy requests. Captain Rubel, plot a course to Shing 7. Also, since I am aware we are out of the Xing 4 sensor range, send them a message that we are heeding their warning to the Venture and we are leaving their star system. Perhaps that can buy us some extra time, along with hiding among the orbiting ring of rocks of ice and iron. Wdowski, I expect you can have a robotics construction gang ready to go down to the surface to build the surveillance station in a hyper-jumps time frame. Glen then turned to Captain Mahan. Captain, I assume your intelligence linguistics specialists will then man the surveillance station to collect as much information as you can on the Xingnis. Not just military information, but also any word on the fate of Captain Demi and his crew. The 3 officers replied, "Aye, sir," as they stood and left the conference room. I hope I am making the right choice. I am starting to think Rubel is right. I should have listened to Rebecca and hit his hyper-engines. We could have always had assisted them in repairs on our way back, or Earth could have sent a rescue ship to them. You don't accomplish anything by second-guessing yourself now, stated Granite. Commander, Granite is correct, Mr. Yeager. Landru agreed. Granite added, I don't even think JD is to be blamed. There was no declaration of war between our 2 worlds. The only ones responsible for the destruction of the Venture and the deaths of all those innocent lives are the Xingnis. Clearly the Xingnis are not as nurturing and peace-loving as Ambassador Stern thought they were. I knew what he was doing was risking all their lives. It is my fault for not preventing him from making a grave error in judgment. And spoke up. A panda bear may look cute and cuddly, but only a fool would enter a pen with one, especially unarmed. I think that is exactly what JD did. He climbed over that fence, ignored all the warnings, and toyed with what he perceived as only a mere teddy bear. Yes, and I just stood there and let him climb over that fence when I was in a position to grab him by the shirt tails and pull him back. But I didn't. Why? Just because I didn't want to listen to Rebecca Stern. Glen stood up. He was clearly emotionally shaken. If you'll excuse me, I am going to retire to my cabin.